No one is slowing down in this hiring race for the right talent. That's why Principal wants to help you stay competitive by providing a comprehensive benefits package tailored to your company's and your team's needs. Because having the right benefits may help you reward and retain your team so they feel valued, motivated, and ready for the future. And that makes all the difference for your business. From large corporations to small and mid-sized businesses, Principal has the retirement and group benefits plans customized for your goals. Your company's future depends on its people. Give them the tools they need to succeed. Talk to your financial professional today about the right benefit plans from Principal. Principal Life Insurance Company, Des Moines, Iowa. For important information about our products, visit principal.com/disclosures.
Coming up.
Furious. I was furious. How can someone's blood alcohol content be 0.394 several hours later? That's consuming a lot of alcohol.
For Vault Studios, I'm Reed Redmond. You're listening to The Daily Crime.
As part of this event, it is alleged that the new members, almost all being underage, were provided a bottle of high alcohol content liquor. They were told that the tradition of the chapter was that the entire bottle, approximately 750 milliliters, what's commonly referred to as a fifth, should be consumed by the little at the event.
In March of 2021, a sophomore at Bowling Green State University died of alcohol poisoning after being hazed at a fraternity initiation event.
You said somebody killed my son. Do you feel like there's somebody walking around BGSU's campus that's responsible for a homicide?
Absolutely, 100%. Stone did not have a choice in this matter. I hold them accountable as well. Anyone who was involved that night, whether it's an active member, whether it was his big brother, whether it was another pledge, to come forward, to speak up, to explain what went on that night. I think they're going to help with us getting a stop put in place. But until they do that, they have to live with this. If they're being told to keep quiet, to change their story, you got to live with that the rest of your life.
8 members of that fraternity would be charged with crimes related to the incident. 6 would plead guilty. And just last month, verdicts were reached in the trial against the other 2.
It is a split verdict in the trial of 2 men accused in the death of Bowling Green student Stone Foltz.
There are no winners in this scenario.
Hundreds of millions of dollars gone. Some of the richest people on the planet, giant companies, banks, all conned out of their fortunes by one man. A man that many of his own victims call a genius. Gilbert Chicly. It's an absolutely wild story, and Wondery and Pineapple Street Studios are releasing a new true crime podcast all about it called Persona, the French Deception. I feel like we're always hearing about scams these days. We've covered a handful of them on The Daily Crime. Some scams aren't that complicated or impressive. They're just annoying. But some are super complex. A good scammer knows how to create an entire world around their scam and then find different ways to draw their marks into it. And that's what Chicly's story is about, the art of being a con artist. He found ways to tap into his victims' fears, to play on their egos, and basically get people to give him money. Follow Persona, the French Deception, wherever you get your podcasts, or you can listen early on Amazon Music or early and ad-free by subscribing to Wondery Plus in Apple Podcasts or the Wondery app. Olivia Ugino is joining me from WBNS 10 TV in Columbus, Ohio. Olivia, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
So you recently covered the trial of 2 fraternity members charged in the death of a student at Bowling Green State University named Stone Foltz. First off, what did you learn about Stone Foltz through your coverage of this case?
Yeah, Stone Foltz was a typical college student. He had siblings, parents, and like many young men, decided he wanted to join a fraternity. And, as it's well known across the country, when some people want to join Greek life, there are some things that come along with it. And we're seeing some of the repercussions of that today.
So what is it that happened in this case? What happened back in March of 2021?
Yeah, sure. So Stone Foltz was pledging Pi Kappa Alpha at Bowling Green State University, and he drank an entire bottle of bourbon in March of 21, and that ended up being what unfortunately led to his death.
It is alleged that Stone Foltz consumed all or nearly all of the contents of his bottle, and then was taken home by several other members, including his big brother, Jacob Crin. He was left there alone, where some minutes later he was discovered by his roommate. After observing Stone for a time and calling for aid from friends, they called 911. By the time the first responders got there, the roommate was administering CPR to Stone. He was taken to Wood County Hospital and then to Toledo Hospital, where he passed away on March 7th.
What was your reaction when you got the blood alcohol content level information back?
Furious. I was furious. When I tried to put together the timeline of when Sherry talked to Stone last, when the ritual started, and when his roommate found him face down in his apartment alone, that window was 90 minutes or less that we know of. How can someone's blood alcohol content be 0.394 several hours later? That's consuming a lot of alcohol.
What happens from there as investigators get involved and start to try to figure out what happened here and if there were crimes committed?
Yeah, so I think to really understand in Ohio the way hazing is handled, you have to look back at the case of Colin Wyant, who died after hazing in 2018 at Ohio University. So Colin dies, and his family works to pass Colin's Law, and that was not passed until 2021. So that law, basically, to simplify it, makes hazing a felony. So prior to that, hazing was considered a misdemeanor. So Ohio is kind of in a weird spot. It's a very tricky spot of what do you do with hazing cases. Now, the case of Stone Foltz, that happened prior to Colin's Law being passed. So these students, they were tried for misdemeanors when it came to the hazing aspect.
Talk about some of the other charges filed in this case, in addition to those hazing charges. Who is ultimately charged and what are they charged with?
You had 8 fraternity members who were facing charges. 6 of them ended up pleading guilty. And then you had to a variety of charges. So you had tampering with evidence, obstruction, hazing, reckless homicide. And then you had these 2 students, and we're talking about Troy Henriksen and Jacob Crin, who went through the full trial. And so when you're looking at the verdict in this trial, it's split because, you have these students, Troy Henriksen and Jacob Crin, who ended up being found guilty of hazing and other minor charges, but those felony charges, manslaughter, homicide, they were not found guilty of those charges, which is kind of an interesting spot for the family on the family side.
Can you talk a little bit more about what happened when this case went to trial? What was the case that the prosecution laid out in court?
So you have prosecutors laying out just the idea of what is needed to happen for students to become members of the fraternity. So that was kind of the big center of this case was the drinking of the bourbon, was that a requirement to join the fraternity, or did Stone Foltz do that on his own conscience? Did he choose to do that willingly? So that's where you have the center of this case.
The trial ended in late May with, as you mentioned, a split verdict. Henriksen and Crin were acquitted of involuntary manslaughter and reckless homicide.
Not guilty of the offense of involuntary manslaughter,
but convicted of several hazing-related counts.
Guilty of the offense of hazing.
When will we know more about the sentences that they'll receive?
That is expected in July.
I want to go back to that new law that you told us about in Ohio called Colin's Law that's now in effect. How would this case have looked different if Henriksen and Crin were charged today as opposed to when they were charged in 2021.
So if they were to have been tried today, those hazing charges that they were found guilty of, those would be felonies, which would make this case very, very different. And I had the chance to talk with the family's attorney, and the family's attorney was saying, this might not have happened had these students known that if they were involved in hazing, they would face felony charges.
If the Ohio legislature had passed Collins law when it should have, after Colin Wyant passed away, instead of letting it die on the vine, Stone Foltz would likely be alive today because Collins law makes hazing a felony.
The parents of Stone Foltz were in the courtroom every day of this trial. What have we heard from them following the verdict?
I had the chance to speak with the family's attorney following the verdict. And when we talk to families and, the people who are involved in their cases do not get the full maximum punishment, a lot of the time they are upset. They want the full punishment. They want anything and everything to bring justice to their loved ones. And that was not necessarily the case with the Stone Foltz family. They were more so just pleased and excited that the hazing, that they were found guilty of hazing, that what they call the truth came to light, that there was hazing.
I think they were hoping for the truth to come out and for justice to be done, whatever that looked like.
In addition to your conversation with the family's attorney, Stone Foltz's parents also released a statement following the verdicts. What did they share in that statement?
They obviously deeply, deeply miss their son and want him to be here with us, but you can't go backward, you can only go forward. And they kind of touched on that in their statement. And, we talk to a lot of families who lose loved ones in horrific, horrible ways, and they try to make the world a better place so their loved one didn't leave this earth for nothing. And that is exactly what the Stone Foltz family is looking to do. They said in their statement that they will not rest until hazing is eradicated on all university campuses.
You just never stop thinking about it. You never stop thinking about Stone. It's constantly on your mind, and, you have a hard time focusing, and you got brain fog, and it just feels like it was yesterday.
You mentioned the 6 other students charged in this case had already pleaded guilty to various charges. So now we have 8 individuals who've either pleaded guilty or been convicted in this case. When you talked to the family's attorney, he also made it clear that this isn't the end of the road, that they plan to bring this to civil court. Talk about that.
Yeah, sure. So there is the university aspect of how much was the university involved, what did they do to protect the students? So that is part of the case that is definitely going to be happening moving forward. The family's attorney, when I spoke with them, said it would be a couple of weeks before they would file on that.
Olivia Ugino with 10 TV in Columbus, Ohio. Thanks for sharing this story.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for listening to this episode of The Daily Crime. We're right here with a new one every day of the week, Monday through Friday, so make sure you're subscribed to or following the podcast wherever it is you're listening right now. If you're looking for something else to listen to, you can head over to voltstudios.com for a full list of our shows that includes our weekly podcast, True Crime Chronicles. That'll do it for this one. Until next time, for Volt Studios, I'm Reed Redmond.